Well, Shabbat Shalom and Hag Sameach. This week, Shabbos is also the Shabbat of Sukkot. And this is VBS Torah Study, and I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, joined this morning by my friend, my teacher, the newly resurrected, Rabbi Mark Gelman. Mark, it's great to see you. It's great to see you well and healthy and strong
Thank you,
again.
thank you, thank you.
It's
Chag
wonderful,
Sameach.
wonderful to be back together. So
Thank
this Shabbos is a strange Shabbos because it's in the middle of the holiday of Sukkot.
Yeah.
And that makes it a very important Shabbat. Um, Sukkot, of course, is Man Simchatenu in the calendar of the Jewish people, the time of our joy. It is the exact opposite of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was a day of fasting and denial of the body, denial of the self, of enjoyment. Sukkot, God tells us, go outside, build a sukkah, sit under the fall sky, feel the breeze on your face. If it rains, you'll feel a little rain, you'll feel the warmth of the sun, and give thanks for the bounty of the land. It is the most natural of all of our Jewish holidays because we're outside, living outside, feeling weather, feeling the outside, feeling the landscape all around us. And here in California, of course, it's a glorious time to be outside because it's so beautiful, warm in the daytime, a little cool at night. And you're supposed to have a feast in the sukkah every night in order to give thanks to God for the gifts of life, for the gifts of the harvest, for the bounty of life. And yet there's a polarity to this. There's a dialectic. There's a sort of more serious side to this very wonderfully happy holiday, this joyful holiday. And that is that when you build a sukkah, you're not allowed to build it too firm. It's supposed to be a little shaky because the holiday also represents our dependency and the vulnerability of being a human being. The fact that you sit in a sukkah with leaves above you and the fact that the elements can fall down upon you is a reminder that none of us is impervious to the passage of time, to the exigencies of life, to the changes in nature. There's this vulnerability built into being a human being. And that's represented by the shakiness of the sukkah. And at the same time, the other great element of that vulnerability is the book that we read. Now, you remember that in the Hebrew Bible, at the end of the Hebrew Bible, there are five Megillot, five scrolls that are read at five different times of the year. The most obvious one is the book of Esther is read on Purim, because that's the story of the book of Esther. The book of Lamentation, a book of sadness over the destruction of Jerusalem, is read on Tisha B'Av in the summertime. The book of Ruth, a book about a story about a young Moabite woman who joins our people and accepts God and accepts Torah, is read on Shavuot, when we read the story and tell the story of the accepting of Torah, right? Then, of course, the most unobvious one is on Pesach. We read Shir HaShirim, this sensuous love poem, because after 7 nights of matzah, who isn't in the mood for love? And well, really, because Pesach was seen by the tradition as the beginning of the deep, intimate relationship between Israel and God, and the book of Shir HaShirim was seen as a metaphor for that, an allegory for that. And now we get to Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, this happy holiday of thanksgiving, of harvest, of bounty, of abundance. And we're going to read Kohelet. We're going to read Kohelet because what it's going to remind us of, and we'll talk about this in depth now, what we're going to remind us of is that, yes, we are creatures in nature, but we're more than that. Because nature occurs in cycles. Day follows night, follows day, follows night. Winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall. And there are many religions and many mythologies and many philosophies that see nature as the template for human experience, which is why, according to Joseph Campbell, the circle is the most common symbol in all of world religion. But the problem with that, and the advantage of that, by the way, is that says it's birth and growth and maturity and decay and death, but then rebirth. That's the circle. The circle erases death. Except that works for the species. It doesn't work for the individual. And therefore, Kohelet begins with a very sober, you might even say cynical observation. There's nothing new under the sun. Nothing ever changes, right? The rain falls, but the rivers and seas are never filled. Nothing ever changes. Whenever someone comes and says, hey, that's new, it wasn't, it happened before, history is on a great Mandela, a great circle, repeats itself again and again and again. That is one attitude toward history. The problem with that attitude toward history is that it erases the individual. Because if I'm simply to be supplanted by the next generation and the next generation, and nothing I do ever lasts, well, then what's the value of my individual existence? And that's the great question of Kohelet. What's the value of our existence? And that's what makes Kohelet such a deep book, but in some ways a very strange book that it was included in the Bible and included in our tradition and read on this happy, very happy holiday. Tell me about Kohelet, Rabbi.
Well, that's everything that you said is what I would say. So goodbye, everybody.
No, no, come on.
No, I love what you said, and I agree with it. Um, it was interesting. There's always something when you speak, when you teach, that I didn't think of before. And here's what I'm thinking of now that I didn't think of before. Zman Simchatenu, right? This is how the label and the Kiddush for this holiday of Sukkot is the time of our joy. All right. So I never thought of that except now, but I'm thinking, wait a second. What does it mean, the time of our joy? Why isn't it the time of our dwelling in booths or the time of our harvest? Or there's 100 things it could be, but not the time of our joy. And when you compare it to the other Chagim, they're all described in exactly appropriate ways. Zman Matan Toratenu for Shavuos, right?
The time we got the Torah,
Right.
right?
And
Pesach.
for Pesach, it's our
Zman Cherutenu,
Yitziat Mitzrayim.
the time of our liberation, right?
Yeah, the time of our liberation, or Yitziat Mitzrayim. And those are exactly what they are. But why our joy? It doesn't have anything to do with anything historical. All the other holidays have to do, and there's only three, Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, that are called Chagim. What's going on here? So the Torah is not a work of theology. It's unfortunate to us that we didn't have a bunch of lazy rabbis who sat around and had nothing to do but write long books about the meaning of existence. I mean, to listen to Aquinas or to listen to the scholastics, these were medieval priests who had nothing to do but to create these enormous erudite works of philosophy and theology. We never had that. So but we have occasions where the Torah dips into what do we believe as Jews. The rest of the Torah is about what we went through as Jews. But occasionally it touches on what do we believe as Jews. And that's why Sukkot is so important. And that's why it's Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy. Here it is. If you look at, I look at the basket of dirty clothes in our closet, and at a certain point, they have to be washed. But after they're washed, the basket's empty. There's no dirty clothes in our house for maybe 30 minutes. And the same is true in our spiritual life. If you go through Rosh Hashanah, the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance, and Yom Kippur, and you go through this entire Cheshbon HaNefesh, this entire accounting of your soul's failures, in the course of the year, your most pure time is Sukkot. It's before your basket of dirty clothes gets filled up again.
Mm.
And the joy that you have in unmitigated connection to a God who loves us and has redeemed us and has pardoned us is so overwhelming that the right response to it is joyousness. And that's why Zman Simchatenu is the right label for the holiday, because it labels the time of the year when we're most pure. And there is a joy at being at your most pure time.
Mm.
You know, Eddie, you think about, I do now that I'm old and decrepit. I think about the time in my life when I was physically as my strongest, right?
Hmm.
And you do too. And there's a point you think back, yeah, I'm not at that point. I accept where I'm at. I could be better, but I accept that I've passed through the strongest time of my life, and it's not returning. And the same is true about our spiritual life. You know, that we had moments when we were purer than we are now, but we still have wisdom that we didn't have when we were young.
Mm.
And that's what the joy comes from. It comes from not just being pure, as pure as you can be during the year. It comes from the wisdom of age and being and the things you've learned. Yes, it's true that I can't run as fast as I used to. It's true that my golf handicap has gone up. But what's also true is that I know things that I didn't know before. I'm kinder than I was before. I'm more patient than I was before. Some of that is the result of being your friend and watching you.
Mm.
But there is a sense of happiness that merges into what Aristotle called virtue. And that's what the Sukkot is about, the
Yeah.
time of our virtue.
I
That's
think
what I do.
it's a quality of joy which is different than the American idea. The American idea of joy is fun.
Correct.
Fun is a distraction. It's a withdrawal from the world. Yeah, I go to Disneyland to get out of my life, right?
That's
I turn
perfect.
on the TV and watch a movie to escape from my life. Joy is an engagement with life and an engagement with the things there that raise me up, that give me a sense of happiness, particularly connection. Connection with my family, with my friends, with my community, with my people, connection with nature, connection with God. That's what simcha is. It's these moments of connection. So now Kohelet asks a question, Mark, and it's something that you've spoken about frequently. So I want to move to that question.
Yeah, let's go to that.
Kohelet asks this question. Kohelet is the guy who says, look, I look into the world and what do I see? I see that time and death are the two constants, or is the constant in human mortality, human existence,
Not just human, that's
in
the
all
key.
existence, right?
All right, the
Certainly
beast and
what
the person have the same fate.
certainly what Yom Kippur nailed it, pounded into us because we spend Yom Kippur, in our white kittel, in our death shroud,
Yeah.
fasting and thinking about the end of life. So Kohelet comes along and says, look, if I take death as the constant in life, right? And I look at all the things that human beings engage in. And you know what I discover? It's all futile. The Hebrew word is hevel, which is translated at the beginning of the book as either futility or vanity. Hevel, by the way, as you remember, is actually the literal meaning of the word hevel means mist. It's the weather report here in Los Angeles about 6 months of the year, early morning, low clouds and fog burning off by noon. And what Kohelet says is what's worth devoting yourself to? What's worth worrying about? What's worth engaging in or investing myself in if it's all going to be wiped out by death? if all of the things I build and all the things I make and all the things I try, the great circle of time is going to come around and it's all going to be gone. It's like little kids building sand castles at the shore, and the tide comes in late in the afternoon, washes it all away. And then some other kids come the next day, and the tide comes in and washes their away. And he says, there's nothing new and there's nothing worth doing. And he goes through what I read in the book is he goes through these four experiments. He looks at the things that we normally engage in, this pursuit of pleasure,
And wealth, yeah.
the pursuit of money, the pursuit of wisdom, and the pursuit of righteousness. And he says, in the end, everybody dies. What difference does it make? And in the end, it's all these ironies, right? The problem with the pursuit of pleasure is that it's fun while you have it, but it doesn't last, right? And the problem with wealth, of course, we all can see this, is that a guy works his whole life to make a fortune and gives it to his good for nothing kid who blows it in a year, right? What good is that? And wisdom, all right, so I know stuff that people don't and not everybody knows, but in the end, me and the fool end up in the same place. And frankly, he's happier, right?
Right, because he doesn't know anything.
Right. I sit on the couch and I watch CNN and tear my hair out, and I look over at my dog, and my dog doesn't watch CNN, and he's a lot happier than I am.
Yep.
Right. And then righteousness, which is really ironic because the Torah is all about Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani. You know, you will be holy because I, God, am holy. And yet Kohelet says, you know what? Be holy, be good, be moral, but don't be too holy. Don't be too, just don't overdo it.
Right, because righteous people
Get
are
crushed.
punished
Right.
and evil people prosper.
And in the words of the great Fagin, you got to pick a pocket or two.
Yeah.
And so, ironically, he says everything that people engage in this world, nothing gets you past death. And therefore, he says, the only thing you can do is to enjoy the rhythms of life. That's the poem that he stole from the Birds and Pete Seeger. A time for every purpose under heaven.
To everything there is a season.
To everything there is a season. And so enjoy it. And then in the last chapter, in the 9th chapter, he says, go and enjoy life. Go and sit in your sukkah with the people you love and eat a good meal and drink good wine and do it with all your might. Don't hold back, but don't think that anything survives. That's all you get out of life. Now, Mark,
Right.
you have preached frequently that that's something that's wrong.
It isn't true. It's true for the Torah. It's not true for Judaism. And this has been the passion of my later existence when Father Tom asked me, why don't you ever talk about heaven? And I said, oh my goodness. And it turns out, to say, first of all, the main point here, and then the proof. The main point is that the proof that Judaism did not develop a belief in life after death, what we call olam haba, until after the biblical period, in the rabbinic period. The proof for that before the rabbinic period, you're dead, you're dead. There's a place called Sheol, which is basically a place where
It's a waiting room.
where you'll get buried.
It's like the waiting room at the dentist office with old magazines.
Well, or the recycling. It's
Right,
not a
the
recycling center, it's the end.
Right.
But anyway, the point of it is the answer to Kohelet's agony is, what are you, nuts? After you die, your soul goes on to live a glorious existence with God in the world to come, Olam Haba, and you are reunited with those you love, and you will not be separated forever from those you love, and the wicked are annihilated, and the righteous are fully rewarded, so that the imbalance of providence, of the reward and punishment, is equalized out in the world to come. It all works out. But it isn't there. And that's the proof that it isn't there, and and the proof that it is there later is the rabbis talk all about Olam Haba, Chaye olam nata b'tochenu at the Torah brachas. You have implanted within us eternal life, and all of the other things the rabbis talk about, and they develop it. The other proof that it's not in the Torah, life after death, is Job. Job has the same problem that Kohelet really has, and they're about the same time written, late books, and that is, why am I suffering? I'm righteous. Well, you're suffering now because maybe you've made some mistakes now, but don't worry, they're just cleaning the decks so that in the world to come, everything will be okay. So now there it is. We believe in the world to come. This all happened because in 332, Alexander the Great, who had been tutored as a teenager in the Lyceum by Aristotle, and had been tutored in philosophy and ruling and all, he comes and he conquers Judea. And he meets at that time a bunch of itinerant scholars who call each other Rav. They call each other Rabbi. They also were the Pharisees. It was this whole underground that was not priestly. It wasn't the Sadducees. These weren't organized around priests in the temple. These were people who were saying, wait a minute, there's something here. And what Alexander taught these people was Aristotle's notions of matter and form. Matter is the principle of potentiality. Form is the principle of actuality. And then in his book, De Anima, on the soul, Aristotle talks about how the soul is the purpose of the body. And it's the animating force of the body. He had a dispute with Plato about whether the forms had their own world or not. The fact remains, though, that for Aristotle, everything in the world is matter and form. Like clay is matter, form is the form of a horse, and somehow they get put together, and the result is an actual horse.
There you go.
Right. So this is exactly what the rabbis, early rabbis, were taught by Alexander to Aristotle. And they said, wait a minute, this is exactly what we need. This is exactly what we need to solve the problem of Kohelet and Job. And we need new language for it, though. We can't use the old language because people know that it doesn't mean that. So the old language that is translated as soul in the Torah, often and incorrectly, is nefesh. But it doesn't mean soul because the opposite of nefesh isn't goof. It's not your body. There's no opposite to it. It's life.
It's the life force of the body. Yeah.
It's the elan
It's
vital. It's
right.
your
Biological energy, call it that.
exactly right. So that's what the Bible is. That's what the Torah is. It's you have your nefesh. What the rabbis added was a new word, not in the Torah, nowhere there, that reflected the new idea of matter and form, body and soul, and that the word for soul that the rabbis invented was neshama, neshama. And then they added the opposite, which was guf. So guf and neshama are united,
Body and soul.
body and soul. When you die, whoop, your body goes back into the ground and disintegrates. Your soul goes up to the Olam Haba. It's also called Gan Eden. There's several names for it, but basically it's the world to come.
Mhm.
Heaven became the Christian language for it, but that's it. Now, and that's what happened.
And it solved a problem for the rabbis.
Everything.
The
It solves
problem.
providence. It solves justice that solves Ecclesiastes' agony of death.
Right.
Everything. The
Because
problem.
Ecclesiastes asks us, why be righteous if the end of a righteous man is the same as an evil man? And in fact, evil people tend to do better in the world than righteous people because they are so selfish, because they don't have the empathy and so it certainly solves the problem of Job, which is how come the righteous suffer?
Solves all those problems. Here's the problem. To just take a leap forward to the time of the Gelman Feinstein uh, time in the history of Judaism. Why is it that when Gelman looks around and when Feinstein looks around and he agrees with Gelman, which is rare, but it happens, which is, wait a minute, we believe in Olam Haba, we believe that death is not the end of us, but if you go to any arbitrarily selected number of synagogues at any arbitrarily selected Shabbatot or Yontifs, you're never going to hear a rabbi talk about heaven.
Mm.
Ever, 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 ever. And I have been asked this, that's what Tom asked me, and I said, I gave him the answer that we're all given in seminary. Well, we believe that we should be focused on this world, not the next world, because we don't want to take away our impulse to fix this world. And then I realized I look at Martin Luther King, at Gandhi, and at Mother Teresa, and I say, wait a minute, here's two Christian and a Hindu, and they are absolutely committed to fixing this world, and they are absolutely committed to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion that you can't preach about heaven because it takes away your passion to fix this world, wrong. It's just wrong. And the end result of it is, I believe, it's because of early reform and conservative rabbis in the 19th century who basically said, look, this just sounds too Christian to us. It just sounds too Christian to talk about heaven.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer to it. But what I do know is that as long as I draw breath, I'm going to do, and I gave this lecture at your shul and wherever I can, which is, hey, we can't give away the best thing we ever invented, and we didn't even invent it. Aristotle did, but it solved everything. And it gives people hope. Aside from it being good for the moral calculus and evening out the scales of justice, it also gives people hope. It's
Yeah, I
saying,
think part of the
why? Why? Tell me
I'm going
why.
to tell you why. I'll tell you why. I think part of the responsibility goes back to our friend Maimonides in the
Oh,
12th century. Because so his first published work was a commentary on the Mishnah. Um, he wrote it when he and his family were fleeing to Tunisia. And he writes a commentary on the last chapter of Mishnah Sanhedrin, which is called Chelek. And it's a question, the Chelek begins with a statement of the rabbis that all Israel has a place in the world to come, right? That's what the rabbis taught. And then it goes on and says, except for these guys, except for these various forms of Jewish heretics, right? And Maimonides writes on that. He says, well, let's talk about that. And that's where you get the 12 or 13 principles of faith that Maimonides writes. But in that statement, what he says is, we don't do mitzvot. We don't live righteously only to receive a reward in the next life, because that's a low level of religion. That's a low level of morality. You don't just do the right thing because someone's going to reward you, and you don't avoid the wrong thing because someone's going to punish you. You do it because it's right. You do it because you have a
but that
sense of
doesn't mean it
wait,
doesn't
wait, wait,
exist.
wait, 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 wait. He doesn't. I know, but you see, because he said so. We accept the fact that there's a world to come, that there is an afterlife, not because God's going to reward us for our righteousness, but because God loves us and doesn't want to extinguish us so quickly. That's what he says. And so I think that what happens is you're exactly right in your other comment that the 19th century rationalists who
Yes.
tried to make Judaism palatable to assimilating Jews in Central Europe of the 19th century said, we want to create a religion of reason. And a reasonable religion doesn't believe in mysterious things like worlds to come. And they followed Maimonides to say, and besides, we do what's right not because we earn a reward. We do what's right because it's right and because we love God and we love the vision of God's world that God gives us as a world of wholeness. And that's where we let it go. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of the fact that the great question Kohelet asks us, and even more so the great question that Job asks us, which is, is God finished with us at the end of our lives, or is there something else? Right? Is life precious enough for it to go on after the death of a body? I think that's a remarkably deep and powerful question, and
It's
I
the
think
only question.
your conviction is very important.
And I
And the
think your
Bible,
reasons
yeah,
are exactly right historically, but they don't.
they don't resonate.
No, they don't resonate. And also, what in the world does it mean to say after every single Torah aliyah, "V'chayei olam natan b'tochenu,"
Right.
you have implanted within us eternal life?
Yeah, we say it all the time. We just don't know it. Right.
Because we don't know what the words mean or we don't think about it. I think it's because rabbis haven't emphasized it enough. But I think that the reason that they haven't spoken about it is is a different thing. It's the complication in life after death in Judaism that is caused by the belief in Techiyat HaMetim. Techiyat HaMetim is really the form, and Neil,
Resurrection.
yeah, I'm sorry. It means that your body will be resurrected at the end of time. Neil Gilman has written a wonderful book about that. And his point is Olam Haba is fine, but it's not really Jewish, which of course it is. The real Jewish thing is your resurrection of the body. And early reformers and conservative Jews said, wait, please, are you serious? When you have an amputated limb, you're going to put it in the grave so that when the person is resurrected, they have their arm there? Are you serious? And there's medrash about it that's so scathing. It's Ishmael's Medrash. It says, and what happens about the man who drowns and then a fish eats him, but then they catch the fish, they eat the fish, then a lion eats the man who ate the fish, and who gets resurrected here?
Who gets what? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is there anything left of the poor guy who's going to get resurrected? It's hilarious. So I think that the actual truth of the matter is that rabbis don't talk about theology much.
That's right.
They just don't.
It's embarrassing. It's difficult.
We aren't
It's
a
scary.
community of belief.
Right.
We're a community of action and behavior. But it isn't true that we aren't a community of belief. And any rabbi who's counseled people who are dying or who just lost a relative who's the only comfort that I've ever encountered that in any way pierces their veil of tears is, I used to say, what Harry said to Blanche on the edge of the grave, once of the 1,000 funerals I've done. And Harry says to Blanche, Blanche, I'm coming, honey. I'm going to see you. I'm coming. And the question is, was Harry lying?
Yeah.
And he wasn't lying. And that hope that you will not be separated forever from those you love is essential in keeping religion alive.
I think
And
it's a lovely idea. No, I think you're exactly right. There is one other. I don't want to
yeah,
argue with you because I agree with you, but there's one other, which
yeah,
is
what is it?
the other thing that you offer Harry at that moment is the fact that his community is gathered around him, that his family is gathered around him, that he's not alone. I got to tell you, I had an experience this last year. I talked about it, not this past year, but the year before, where I went to see a funeral, to perform a funeral for somebody that I knew, and there was nobody there.
Yeah,
The only
yeah,
person was what the person's partner, but nobody from the community. Person had a long history of mental illness, and
and no
basically
family.
no family, and all the relationships had waned. And so it was me and this fellow who was her partner. And the two of us spent a couple of hours together, just being together. I was there for him. But it was the saddest funeral because, even if it's a small group, it's somebody. Somebody
Yeah,
remembers this person. Someone cares for this person. That's the other kind of afterlife that exists. And here too, here's another way to read Kohelet, and I'm not disagreeing with you. But the other way, one of the strange things about Kohelet is that if you look over his meditations on pleasure and wealth and wisdom and righteousness, they're all written in the first person singular. The pronoun you hear over and over again is I. I did this and I did this and I discovered this. And the problem is Kohelet doesn't seem to have a social context. He's not in it for him. He's only in it for himself. And if you take the same things he explores and you add a social context, well, it changes the whole valence of the thing. Yes, the pursuit of pleasure is momentary and ephemeral, but I got to do something. Going to dinner with someone I love and someone I care for is a whole lot different than just going to dinner by myself.
yeah,
Taking my grandchild to Disneyland is a whole experience different than going there myself, right? Wealth
right.
is the same thing. So if I accumulate wealth only for my own aggrandizement, my own pleasure, it's one thing. But if I use wealth to touch the world in some way, I use wealth as tzedakah, then it changes the valence of wealth. Same thing with righteousness. He has a comment where he says, alongside righteousness, there's wickedness, and alongside wickedness, there's justice. And so it makes no difference. And the problem is that if you saw wickedness in the world, why didn't you do something? Why doesn't it claim you? And then finally, the most ironic one of all, Mark, is he says, what's the good of gaining wisdom? And he's right under his rubric. But here's the strange thing. If you really believe that nothing is new under the sun, that nothing ever changes, why write a book? Why write a book? You and I know that writing a book takes an awful lot of work, right? You write a book because you think you're going to make some change in the world after you. And that's the great irony that the guy who said there's no way in the world to achieve immortality, we're still reading his book 2,300 years after he's dead.
No question.
That's the irony. We're still reading, we're quoting him, we're arguing with him 2,300 years after his death. So the other form of immortality is in the people that we touch in our lives. But I think that you're exactly right. That what's missing from Kohelet and it's missing from contemporary Jewish faith is this idea that we're valuable enough, we're loved enough, we're important enough to go on living after our bodies have fallen apart and died. And I think that's very true. I think that's a very powerful intuition.
It has to be true because just one final point, which is if we are made B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, what does that mean? Whatever it means, and it's impossible to know what it means completely, it's beyond our pay grade. But what it definitely means is there's something in us that's also in God. That's at the minimum, we know that that's true from that belief. There's something in God that's true in us. Well, is God mortal? No. Is God material? No. So there it is. There's a non-material, immortal part of us that is connected to God. That's our neshama. That's our soul. So it has to be true. Even if there is no equalization of good and bad, even if the goodness is its own reward, even if all the things of life are futile, and evil is sometimes not punished, and righteousness is sometimes not rewarded. It doesn't matter, because the point of life after death, the point of the Olam Haba, the point of heaven, is that it's a place where we can completely fulfill all the loves of our life.
Hmm.
We are unable to completely fulfill all the loves of our life here, but in the world to come, we are.
Hmm.
We're able to fully love God. We're able to fully embrace those we loved in life. And that fulfillment is why I say this with great sadness. People who believe in life after death, particularly Christians, die better than Jews.
Hmm.
The Jews I've counseled who are close to death are oftentimes filled with great fear and great agony that this is the end of everything, the end of the book, the end of the movie. But if they believed that there was something beyond the grave and that the journey of their soul was still fantastic and not ended, then they would have hope. And if that
Hmm.
hope isn't true, well, then I still fall back on Pascal's notion, which is called the Pascal wager, which is I'm not, he said, I am uncertain if there is a life after death or not. But what I do know is I would rather believe that there is life after death and be wrong than not believe that there is life after death and be right.
Wonderful. So we have a custom on Sukkot that we do something called Ushpizin, which is inviting our ancestors to come sit with us in the sukkah. And I asked Sherry last week. I want to ask you the same question. So you're doing Ushpizin. You're going to invite Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca and Jacob and Leah and Aaron and David and Solomon. Mark, who would you invite to your sukkah for a dinner of anybody in the world, living or dead? Who would
Not
you?
just Jewish.
Anybody in the world, living or dead, that you could have dinner with in the sukkah.
Well, it would have to be Aristotle, but after that, it would be Rambam. And after that, Sandy Sandy Koufax, who's still living, and I hope he lives to 120. But after he dies, I want to meet him, and I want to tell him that he changed my life by not pitching and on Yom Kippur in
50 years
Minnesota.
ago this year, 50 years ago,
50 years ago. That's right, 55. 65, 65.
65. Right. So 60 years ago.
Unbelievable. I said, here's the most famous baseball player in the world who's saying there's something more important than baseball. There must be something there.
I just love that dinner table, though. You and Betty and Aristotle, Maimonides, and Sandy Koufax.
That's the deal.
And as I say, Maimonides is going to turn to Sandy Koufax and say, tell me again what you do. And Koufax is going to turn to Maimonides and say, I had an ERA of 1.5 in the
Four
65.
perfect games.
Yeah, I pitched 4 perfect games in the 65 season. What was your ERA? And Maimonides,
Exactly right.
I think that's a
Exactly.
wonderful image. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark.
I
Hag
love you.
Sameach. Let it be a damn time of peace. Bring peace, please, God. And let's everyone enjoy the Shabbos, enjoy the holiday. Take good care.
Chag Sameach.